You know, there's this invisible language that basically decides whether our electrical grids stay on or just go dark. And it all comes down to a battle of standards, IEC versus GB. Understanding this hidden code, well, it's absolutely everything when you're talking about safety and reliability.
And look, that's not an exaggeration at all. The stakes are just incredibly high. We're not talking about some boring bureaucratic documents here. These are literally the playbooks for preventing a total disaster. The tiniest little details, that fine print they mention, have massive real-world consequences.
So, okay, what happens if you just ignore it? I mean, it's a fair question, right? You buy the best gear, you follow the instructions. What could possibly go wrong if you happen to overlook one little standard? Well, let me paint you a picture.
This is really the heart of the mystery we're diving into. You've got this top-of-the-line component, engineered for perfection, and it just spectacularly breaks down. And the reason why? It was an invisible spec, a hidden environmental factor that nobody accounted for. It didn't fail because it was a bad product, it failed because it was in the wrong place. And that, right there, is where our story really begins.
All right, so to get to the bottom of why that component failed, we really need to understand the why behind all these rules. These standards aren't just there to make life difficult. They are the fundamental code of electrical safety.
I love this analogy from the source material. Think about it like this. Just like our DNA dictates how an organism is built to survive in its environment, these standards define the physics of failure for an electrical device. They spell out exactly how it should perform and, maybe even more importantly, how it should fail safely.
So what do they actually do? Well, it really boils down to three critical jobs. First, they define the safety margins. How much heat, voltage, and stress a device can take before it gives up. Second, they ensure interoperability, making sure all the different parts can play nice and work together as a team. And third, and this is a big one, they mitigate your legal risk. If an accident happens, you can bet the first thing investigators are going to check is compliance.
And here's a perfect example of that teamwork in action. It's a concept called Type 2 coordination. In simple terms, it means that when a fuse blows to stop a short circuit, the contactor it's supposed to be protecting doesn't weld itself shut. The whole system works together, which prevents a tiny little fault from turning into a massive, expensive, and dangerous problem.
All right, so let's meet our two main players here, IEC and GB. But please, don't think of them as just a couple of boring rulebooks. I want you to think of them as two completely different philosophies for how to achieve safety. One is like a global passport, designed to work pretty much anywhere. The other, well, it's a specialist, hardened for some of the toughest environments on Earth.
This slide really nails the core difference. See, IEC is all about creating this universal product that performs predictably no matter if it's in a clean room in Frankfurt or an office building in Dubai. GB, on the other hand, is all about hardening for the real world, a world that's often dusty, high up, and pretty unforgiving.
So let's kick things off with IEC, the International Electrotechnical Commission. Their whole goal is to create a product that you can trust anywhere on the globe, as long as it's in a relatively standard, predictable environment.
The whole IEC philosophy is really built on precision. It defines these super strict categories for different kinds of motor loads, making sure a contactor can handle the exact stress of its job. It also demands high immunity to grid surges. There's a spec for that called BIL, or Basic Impulse Level. Think of it as the gear's ability to take a punch from a lightning strike or a massive power surge and just keep on going. And of course, there's a huge focus on protecting people from touching hot parts. It's all about controlled, predictable, safe performance.
All right, now for the other side of the coin, the GB standard, which comes from China. Now, this is not just a cheap copy of IEC. It's a really pragmatic adaptation, built to handle the real world, not just some idealized lab conditions. So while the GB standards are about 80% in line with IEC, it's that last 20% that makes all the difference. And those differences, they're not mistakes or shortcomings. They are deliberate survival traits, engineered specifically for the kind of extreme industrial and geographical conditions you find across China.
So what kind of extremes are we really talking about? Well, this one number pretty much says it all. 4,000 meters. That's over 13,000 feet. While IEC standards just assume you're operating below 1,000 meters, GB actually has specific requirements for what they call plateau products, which are designed to work safely at these incredible altitudes.
So why does altitude matter so much? Well, it all boils down to some pretty cool physics called Paschen's law. Basically, the air gets thinner the higher you go. right? Well, that thin air is a terrible insulator. It means electricity can arc across gaps way more easily. So GB standards account for this by demanding physically larger air gaps or clearances in their high-altitude gear. It's a solution that's dictated purely by the laws of physics.
Okay, so you've got these two different mindsets, these two philosophies. How in the world do you actually make a choice? Well, it comes down to looking at the data, listening to real-world stories, and really understanding the specific needs of your project.
This table lays out the trade-offs just perfectly. IEC gives you that global interoperability and flexibility with power frequency. GB, on the other hand, gives you superior adaptation to tough environments. And check out the focus on contact material. IEC prioritizes what's called low chopping current, and that's super important for protecting today's really sensitive motors from getting fried by voltage spikes. GB, though, prioritizes raw anti-welding toughness, built for heavy, demanding industry.
And this case study just makes the choice crystal clear. You're in a cement plant in Sichuan, you've got constant vibration, conductive dust everywhere, and you're at 1,200 meters. Here, a GB-specified contactor is the obvious winner. Its rugged design and wider insulation paths, what's known as creepage distance, are built specifically to prevent flashovers caused by that exact kind of dirty environment.
But now let's teleport over to a data center in Frankfurt. The story completely flips. Here, the environment is spotless, but regulatory compliance and proven uptime are absolutely everything. An IEC standard contactor isn't just preferred, it's essential, because it carries the certifications that insurance companies and regulators in the EU flat out demand.
And this choice you make up front, it has huge implications for your maintenance team down the road. IEC equipment is often designed to be fit and forget, but all that precision can make it less forgiving when it gets dirty. GB gear, on the other hand, is rugged and more tolerant of a miscleaning cycle, but it's built with the expectation that someone is going to be monitoring it regularly.
So, to bring this all together, here's a super practical checklist for you. Think of this as your cheat sheet. Before you buy anything, first, check that you're referencing the absolute latest version of the standard. Next, verify that altitude correction if your site is anywhere over 1,000 meters. You'll also want to confirm the control voltage range, check on your auxiliary contacts, definitely ask about spare parts, and maybe most important of all, always verify those test certificates online.
At the end of the day, it all comes down to this. These standards are not just paperwork. They are a detailed script literally describing the physics of how a device is going to perform and, ultimately, how it's going to fail. So the only question left to ask is, have you taken the time to read the code for your project?